Thanks for joining us for another episode of the VC4A Founder Series. This is a podcast where startup founders share their stories of resilience and answer questions about the challenges and opportunities encountered during their entrepreneurship journey. This series is a collection of conversations with founders highlighting the ingenuity required to thrive in uncertain markets, make it through high-friction situations, and pass crises. Each episode highlights a different founder and the unique set of challenges they are facing. My name is David Coleman. I am the growth lead at VC4A, and I will be your host. This episode is a continuation of our conversation with CrowdForce co-founder Tomi Ayorinde. Let's pick up right where we ended in our last episode.
You set up a business thing. You had to pivot initially because, as they say, no business plan survives first contact with the customer. Right?
Yeah.
You think you know, but the customer will tell you the real.
You don't know.
But
Yeah.
at what point, once you started building this distribution network and you've gotten the merchants, you've got your young people there, at what point did you see that, okay, this has real potential? What were some of the milestones that you needed to see as the leadership team, together with your partner Damiola, to kind of get that confidence, like, okay, this is the direction. Let's double down on this.
Yeah. So I think the science is absolutely easy, right? For example, the very first product we hit the market with, it was a no-brainer. You go to market to talk to clients, they tell you how beautiful and nice it is, but when it's time to pay, they don't pay, right? Or they keep telling you to come back tomorrow, next tomorrow. Oh, I need to get approval from somebody. And then when you look within a 6 months period, you look at it and you're like, there's really no value that has come in within a 6 month period. And it takes a hard conversation to have with yourself to say, this is awesome. In your eyes, it's awesome, it's great, and people are telling you it's awesome also. Even the prospective customers you're talking to are telling you it's awesome, right? But they're just not pulling out the cash to buy it. Then you have to tell yourself, nah, something is wrong somewhere here, right? And then when we rolled out the next product, we could see immediately traction. Someone was willing to pull out the cash and buy. That's how you know you're onto something, right? At least that's how I evaluate that I'm off to something. Once people are ready to pull out their cash and pay for it and they don't mind, right? Like you literally tell them you have to pay and they're saying, okay, or they're open to negotiating. That's how you know, okay, I think I'm hitting some nerves here, some pain points here. And then the final thing is after they start using it, when you start to interview them about their experience, depending on how exciting they are, and they start to tell you about that things that they think they will want you to do. In addition to that, that's how you know, for me, that's how you know, okay, you're doing something right. And I think that's part of the process of finding product market fit. And that's how you kind of get an idea. Okay, I think we're getting product market fit this way.
Awesome. So let's look internally for a minute, right? You've got your external indicators that you're going in the right direction. But what was that story like internally? How did you and your co-founder kind of build the team? What were the things that were really important? Some people want efficiency, culture. There's so many things. Your recruitment process, your onboarding. What was important, and how did the team grow?
Okay, so interesting, right? Is I must confess, when we started building out, I didn't pay much attention to culture and a lot of things because we felt that we were in survival mode, right? Just figure out what works first and then you figure out the rest later. I mean, if I had to go back, I'll do it better, right? But to be open, that's how we went about it. So we brought in hands to just help us achieve specific tasks, right? Either on contract and after being contracted, we felt that they had value to add, then we bring them in on full time. It wasn't until we found product market fit that we started being more specific about the kind of talent we wanted, the kind of culture we wanted to build around this product. More deliberate about it. We spend more time on recommendations, at least in the early stages, it was all recommendations, right? Because you didn't have the time to sift through so many CVs or to hire an external HR person to do that for you. So you rely on my network, his network, the network of our advisors and investors to kind of find the next person to bring in. And then you ask yourself critically, what is most important that we need to bring in right now, right? In some cases, I think we hired some people too early. I think we hired some people at the same time. But if I had to redo it, I think I would ensure that once we achieve a repetitive task in a particular area, that's when we hire someone to take it over. And then we move on to the next thing. That way we ensure that people who come in are fully utilized, right? We keep the team small and maximize as much as we can as we grow.
How big is the team now?
Now we're a team of 33. Yeah, it scares me actually. I think that's
Well, it's not gonna get any smaller. So
get used to it. Yeah.
Okay, so now let's bring it into today's this interesting year we're in right now. Where were you at the beginning of this pandemic? How did you think this year was going to go versus how this year has actually turned out?
Wow. I think we got into YC January this year, right? And I mean, we were super elated, right? Which was come demo day, you meet with a ton of investors, you close your round, and then you start to execute on a lot of the vision and the dreams that you already have pinned down, right? And come March, we couldn't do demo day, right? Like the pandemic started to hit new highs. So mine was even funny. I was traveling to SF when I got the news that there won't be a physical demo day anymore. Yeah, so in the case of, do I go back or do I keep going to SF, right? And before we knew it, we had to come back. So I remember we had a meeting scheduled with an investor that was super interested, right? We were to meet them the next day. And then the night before, the center, I think the day before, the president had declared a state of emergency. So they had to send us an email and cancel the meeting, right? And typically when you're trying to raise a big round, the investors want to have a sit down with you and get to know you and your vision and stuff, right? So we haven't had a chance to do that till now. That was March. That was just do that till now because we also have to now travel out of the system because it made sense to be with friends and family, right, during the lockdown, right? So we also have to get out. So first is it messed up our entire fundraising plan, strategy, vision, whatever we had planned for ourselves. Second was it threw us into personally for me, it was a state of confusion. Like, where do you go? How do you approach this? The only solace I got was world leaders were also confused. So, if world leaders were confused, then who am I? Like, I can't be that bad, right? So, so for about 2-3 months, we weren't clear on what we needed to do, how to go about. Do we go straight into fundraising? Do we wait a bit, right? The good thing we had was the fact that the pandemic didn't result in dropping our revenue or our volumes or transactions, right? Instead, it was an increase. So at times like that, what you do is you take what is working well and you find solace in it. That's at least this part works well, right? And then maybe 2-3 months down the line, we started to realize it ourselves. Look, we have a solid business in our hands, right? Just because there was a pandemic and we couldn't complete our fundraise, and I start to do other things I wanted to do, doesn't mean that everything's ended, right? So we have a solid business in our hands. Let's go out there and show people, look, this business is doing well even in a pandemic, right? If you're not going to invest now, I don't know when you're going to invest, right? And also is to reduce the fundraising targets, right? And then double down on growth. So, which is what we then decided to do. We then said we had some investors who already wanted to invest, even though they were a bit worried. So we said, look, you want to invest $1 million before, it's fine. Give us 100K, right? We'll get rolling with that and show you what we're doing. And then you'll come back yourself much later, right? So we got a far lower, we closed a far lower round, fine by us. Let's hit the market and start rolling, right? So what was interesting is that being able to rethink and just say, look, everything is not bad. It's actually still good, right? And now we're on course to end the year on a much bigger note, right? In fact, our biggest problem now is to manage the growth that's going to happen in Q4, because we're expecting a huge, close to 200 to 300% growth in Q4. So my worry now is how to ensure we manage that growth, right? Yeah, so that's how it's been. So it just meant Q2 and Q3 were quiet, but I think in Q4, hopefully we'll be able to make up for those quiet and actually achieve our 10x ambitions.
Now, digital platforms or digital solutions have generally, in the interviews that we've had, have generally had an upturn. They've actually, performed better, because for looking at what you do, I'm assuming that a lot more people now, once the pandemic hit and it wasn't so easy for people to go to a store physically, then people start to consider the idea of making online payments. Like you said, people who have the means to make online payments but refused to before now have start to give it a second thought. Like, okay, that's not my preferred option, but maybe that is something that I should look into. So, yeah, how do you think the landscape is changing because of the pandemic, and is it changing the way people look at online payments? Is it changing the way people feel they need to access a means of making remote payments?
So I think I've read so much thoughts around that. My opinion is too early to say, because if we don't solve the real problem, people are still not going to. Because so here in Nigeria, I think immediately after the lockdown, we saw the banks being bombarded, right? People finally wanted to get debit cards, right, and ways to ensure that that doesn't happen again. So in that aspect, yes, I think more people are trying to have a backup in case there's a second lockdown. Let me have something that I can use, right? But if the problem of trust, excellent customer service, reliable solutions is still not solved, people have a very short remembrance span. It's only a matter of time before they forget that, oh, there was a pandemic like 2-3 years ago. I should go back to what's convenient for them, right? What they trust, what they believe. So, in my opinion, is we as fintechs, as companies, banks, government, we should use this opportunity to try to ensure that we are providing the best service possible to the customer to incentivize his behavior not to go back to his old ways, right? I think it needs to be a 2-point thing. If it's only 1 point and the other is not done, then you just see a huge spike in digital transactions and then a slight gradual turn back to the old way of life.
Yeah.
But it's an unpopular opinion, so.
No, but, I mean, you're in it, you know. Some people have an opinion, but they're not. They don't have both peas in the soup.
Yeah.
Okay, so other founders that I've also talked to, they've had to accelerate their roadmap. You know, things that they were thinking of doing maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line, they've had to quickly, you know, rejig their business and add on new services, look for new partners. Have you had that kind of experience, or has it pretty much been business as usual within the strange context?
Yeah, so I think it all depends on what is in your roadmap, right? So for us, it hasn't been that we are near to accelerate something in our roadmap. Our roadmap is aligned, right, with what's happening right now. So that hasn't been the case. I know some other people that have had to switch to collecting online payments, which makes sense for them, right? At least for that period. The question is if people will if that, number one, those online payments haven't really matched up to the volumes they used to make, right? So it's still just a spec, right? Which means that people haven't fully embraced it. That's a good way to know if people have fully embraced it. So for us, we haven't made change to bring back any roadmap, to be honest. We're just focused on growth, increasing the number of merchants, users, driving market share. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your overall business again. Now that you've built the business, you're surviving a pandemic. What have you now learned what is the unfair advantage that CrowdForce has? What makes CrowdForce unique?
I think it's a couple of things. It's just an understanding of the markets, right? And it comes to spending more time with the people and understanding how they're thinking. Understanding that distribution is key, right? You talk about people moving to digital payments, right? However, the person needs to go 60 kilometers to be able to do their KYC, open an account, and get a card. There's no pandemics that's going to make them do that, right? It's still, they'll just ride the storm and then still find their ways doing things, right? I'm sure people kept more cash in their houses than ever in this pandemic, right? So it's understanding, for us, was understanding the consumer. Second was understanding distribution as the key parameter to drive growth and achieve financial inclusion. 3 is understanding the psychology of the customer, right? What we're built on 2 key factors: reliability and excellent customer service. And reliability speaks to the consumer to trust us and know that if they run into any issues, we will support them till they get their money back or till the issues resolved, right? So that they may seem like tiny little things, but you need to be in the head of your customer. Once you know what the customer really wants, and give it to them. That's the unfair advantage, in my opinion. And it's not so hard it's right in your face. It's not so hard to figure out.
Okay, so how about the future? Where do you see CrowdForce going now? Are you locked in to your current direction, or are there going to be more services that you're going to add on? What is the future of CrowdForce?
Okay, nice. So without giving too much away, right, is like I said, distribution first, Then after distribution, we layer products on top of that distribution, right? So today we've layered just basic banking services to it. Now we need to think around how, because once we've built out that distribution, what we've done is we've built out an ecosystem, right? An ecosystem of merchants. Then we look at building an ecosystem of users, direct users. And then we figure out how this ecosystem of users and ecosystem of merchants can work together, can share value among each other better, faster, more effective, right? We're partnered with gas stations today, right? So if you were a PayForce customer and you had an app on your phone, if you walked into any of our gas stations, you should be able to do much more, right? You should be able to do a transfer and pay for your fuel, and it's cheaper, it's more reliable, it's faster, right? And things like that. So that's kind of where we're going. And our focus is really strictly on Nigeria at the moment because it's a huge market on its own. There's no point expanding when you haven't really taken enough market share in the local country where you're in. And then next is to kind of evaluate what other similar markets are similar to this that you can take everything you blend here and replicate in that place. Right. So that's the way we are thinking about it. And we have a set of products that we plan to roll out.
Cool. Well, before we end this really interesting conversation, what is your advice to young startups? This podcast is really to help people who are maybe even a little bit early at maybe an earlier stage of development of building their company. The pandemic has hit. People are trying to find their feet. As should I say, a seasoned startup CEO? Battle worn. Let's use that.
Battle scars.
The scars to prove it. What have you learned that might save somebody else? What's your advice?
I think there's a whole lot of advice, right? What I would say is, as concerned the pandemic, just keep building. You can't stop, right? Because of the pandemic. So keep building. I would say that try your best to find product market fit as soon as possible, right? Like that should be so when we started, I didn't even know what product market fit was, right? But now that I know, if I had to do this all over again, my most important one goal will be to just find product market fit as soon as possible. Even if I have to do the product on a part-time basis, whatever works for you, just keep doing it on a low scale until you find that product market fit. Because once you do, then you can then scale. That's one. Two is I've realized that it's easier to have conversation with investors when you have product market fit. When you can show investors in month one, we had 10 users, month two, 10 users, 10, 3, 10. There's some sort of consistency. It's easier to have conversations with investors, right? Sometimes when you're having the conversation too early, it really doesn't add much value because you're still trying to figure it out. Except, of course, there are exceptions to everything, right? Right. So I think my advice would be just keep it on a low budget as much as you can and laser focused on finding consistency for market fits. And then the rest might actually work out itself as we go on.
Now, you're also somebody who mentors others.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. And you yourself have several mentors. Tell us about how does that help you? Tell us about your relationship with your mentors and your relationship with your mentees. Has that helped you as to lead your own business?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks to VC4A. I think the mentorship platform was the first time I had to mentor, which was great because at the time, I must confess, it's not like I found myself adequate enough to mentor, right? And as you start to speak to people, it's somebody else needs that knowledge. So on the mentoring side is what it does is it reemphasizes the things that you already know that is probably going into your subconscious and you don't know. So it reemphasizing is it helps you to think back to where you're coming from and help somebody. The real value there is being able to help somebody else, right? It's amazing. It makes me sleep well at night when somebody can say you said something and it worked out. Like it's like blows. Yeah, right. Also understanding that they don't have to follow every advice you give them, right? So and hopefully help them to actually elicit the advice, not you telling them, right? So it's been an awesome and amazing experience on that side. And then having mentors is also, it's like a mentor saves you like 2-3 years or 5 years of hard work, right? So when I said that the product wasn't selling and we had to build an agent network, it didn't just happen like that. I had a mentor who told me, this seems to be a bigger problem. Look into it, right? I'm not pushing you, but just check it out, right? He dropped that seed in me and then I kind of fleshed it out, right? It's easy for me to say it's my idea, but somebody dropped that seed that made me think about it. And that's the value for mentors, because if he did not drop that idea, I probably wasted 1 more year before I figured it out, right? So mentors are great in that sense and very, very vital.
Well, Tomi, we're at the end of the interview and it's been enlightening. Seriously. Awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing how the company grows and hopefully we'll maybe have you back in the future and see how things have changed, how things have progressed. My regards to Damilola. Am I saying his name right?
Damilola, yeah, you're saying it right. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
I'm glad you could make the time. We almost missed each other a couple of times, but
yeah. yeah.
So thanks a lot for your time and talk to you again soon.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you're a startup founder looking for practical tips, check out the Startup Academy or connect directly with industry-leading experts through the Mentorship Marketplace. Be sure to keep an eye out for new programs and opportunities we make available as VC4A, or boost your capital raising efforts by registering a fundraising campaign request. Our services are free for entrepreneurs, so be sure to sign up at vc4a.com. Subscribe to our podcast and join us again next time. Till then, work smart and stay safe.